Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been getting a lot of questions from listeners about the impact of English being so widespread in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people are thinking about. It's a big question.
So we've got like a whole stack of research here, articles and stuff. We're going to try to really, dive deep into this.
We'll look at how English rose to become so prominent and what it all means for everyone, not just people who like
Right.
grew up speaking it.
So it's not just about like, grammar rules and all that.
Right, this is way bigger than that.
So what are some of the things that like really jumped out at you from all this research?
One of the things that I thought was super interesting is how much English has changed over time. It wasn't always this global like powerhouse.
Yeah.
Back in the 1500s, only something like 6 million people spoke English.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, that is so different from today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, today it's, what, almost 2 billion speakers.
It's amazing how did that even happen?
Well, a lot of it is tied to major historical events. The British Empire, of course, they spread English across, like, continents.
Yep. Colonialism and all that.
Exactly. But then American English came along and became a huge influence, especially in the 20th century.
Movies, music, technology, that kind of thing.
All of that. Hollywood, the internet, all of it helped to shape how English is spoken and spread around the world.
It's interesting, though, because even with all that change, English still manages to, like, stay English. You know what I mean?
It's true. It's always adapting, picking up new words and phrases from other languages and cultures.
That's actually pretty cool, the way it just kind of absorbs everything.
That's kind of the key to its success, that adaptability, that ability to like constantly change and blend in.
That's really interesting. So we've talked about the history, but for our listeners out there, how does all this actually affect their lives? Like, what's the real world impact of all this?
Well, think about jobs and careers. The research is pretty clear that knowing English can seriously boost your earning potential.
Really?
Yeah, one study actually found that, like, bilingual employees in the U.S. with English as their second language made, on average, $7,000 more per year than people who only spoke English.
Wow. That's a big difference.
It's not just about the money, though. It's also about access to, like, better job opportunities.
Right. More options, bigger companies, all that.
A lot of multinational companies list English as a requirement, even for entry-level jobs. And then there's remote work, which is, like, exploding. You could be working with people from all over the world.
And English is probably going to be the language you use to communicate.
Exactly. So, yeah, knowing English really opens up a lot of doors. What about academics? I know a lot of your listeners are, like, interested in education and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Tons of students and lifelong learners.
Well, the fact is, most academic journals, research papers, they're all in English.
So if you want to go to a top university or do like cutting edge research.
English is essential. Over 80% of the world's electronically stored information is in English.
That's crazy. It's like having a key to a secret library.
That's a great way to put it.
It's not just academia, though, right? I mean, think about the internet.
Exactly. Most websites, online courses, even social media.
It's basically an English-speaking world, especially if you're into tech, software development, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, those fields are moving so fast, and so much of it is happening in English.
So English isn't just a language. It's like a tool. It's a way to access information, to connect with people, to advance your career.
Absolutely. But it's also more than that. It's a way to experience different cultures, to enjoy literature, films, music from all over the world.
It's like a cultural passport, kind of.
Yeah, you could say that. But we also have to be realistic. There are concerns, too, right? Like, what about the impact on other languages and cultures? I mean, not everyone is thrilled about English being so dominant.
Right, that's a whole other conversation. We have some articles here that get into that, some pretty serious questions about the effects on linguistic diversity.
We should definitely dig into that more.
We'll definitely tackle that in the next part of our deep dive.
So, yeah, we were talking about some of those, like, downsides. Some people are worried about what happens when English gets so big.
Right, because it's not all, just positive stuff.
Yeah, one of the big things is, like, what about all the other languages?
The idea that they might, like, disappear or something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've got this article here by a linguist, and she makes a really good point. She says that each language, it kind of has its own, like, unique view of the world,
Oh, that's interesting.
So when a language dies out, it's like we lose a way of understanding things. Like a piece of history is gone.
That's a really good point. It's not just words. It's like a whole way of thinking.
Right. And it can have like real consequences for communities.
Hmm.
You know, loss of cultural identity, stuff like that.
And then there's that whole like cultural imperialism thing that came up a lot in the research.
Yeah, that's a big one. The idea is that like English gets so powerful it starts to like take over.
Even if nobody means for it to happen.
Right. It's just like a side effect of English being everywhere. Like we've got this study here that looked at what happens when kids in non-English speaking countries watch a lot of English language TV.
What did they find?
Well, the kids started to like adopt some of those Western values, and sometimes those values they like clashed with their own culture.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you balance the good stuff about English with, these kinds of concerns?
It's tricky. There's no easy answer. But I think the first step is just being aware of it, understanding that language. It's not just words. It's connected to power and like cultural stuff.
Right. It's more than just grammar and vocabulary.
Exactly. And then I think it's about supporting things that encourage people to speak more than one language.
Like learning different languages in school, not just English.
Yeah, stuff like that. And especially making sure we don't lose those like indigenous languages. Those are the ones that are like really in danger.
So it's not about getting rid of English. It's about making sure there's room for other languages too.
That's it. And everyone can play a part.
What can our listeners do?
Well, little things. Like when you travel, don't just assume everyone speaks English. Try to learn a few phrases in the local language, even just like hello and thank you, stuff like that.
It shows respect.
Exactly. It's about like meeting people halfway. And who knows, you might discover you love learning languages.
Yeah, maybe you'll become like a polyglot.
Okay, so we've talked about the impact on other cultures, but what about English itself? We said before that it's always changing. What's next for English?
Well, the internet is a huge factor, obviously. Social media, all that stuff. The way people talk online, it's kind of creating new forms of English.
Oh, totally. Like all those slang words, abbreviations, emojis.
Exactly. There's this study, they looked at Twitter data, and they found that, like, new words and phrases are popping up all the time, faster than ever before.
So English is becoming more, like, informal, more flexible, maybe.
Yeah, it's adapting to, like, the digital world where everything moves so fast. And then there's AI, which is a whole other thing. AI is changing everything.
Right. Think about those language learning apps.
Yeah.
They're getting so good. And translation tools, too.
It's amazing what they can do now.
It's not just about, like, learning and translating, though. AI is actually changing how we use language, like on a fundamental level. There's this research paper. They're talking about the possibility of AI creating completely new languages.
New languages? What do you mean?
Languages that are specifically designed for, like, humans to communicate with machines.
That's kind of freaky, but also super cool.
It's definitely mind-blowing. And it makes you wonder, what happens to human languages then? Do we even need to learn them anymore if AI can do it all?
That's a good question. What do you think?
Honestly, I have no idea. But it's something to think about. Will we see, like, hybrid languages, a mix of human and machine stuff? Who knows? It's all pretty wild.
It's like the future of language is totally up in the air.
Pretty much. But hey, that's what makes it exciting, right?
Definitely. So we've covered a lot of ground here. What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the big thing is English is a powerful tool, no doubt about it. It can open doors to, like, jobs, education, all sorts of opportunities.
But it's not a magic bullet.
Right. You have to use it responsibly, be aware of the impact it can have.
And remember that there are other languages out there, and they're important too.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
Embrace the good stuff about English, but don't forget about the rest of the world.
So learning English is important, but it's not the only thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've talked about, like, the history of English, the impact it has, all that. But now I think it's time to get, down to business.
Yeah, let's talk about how to actually, like, learn this language. We've covered the why. Now it's time for the how.
Right, because it's one thing to, like, understand the importance of English, but it's a whole other thing to actually be able to, speak it, write it, all that.
It's a whole different ballgame, and everyone's journey is different. But there are some, like, common things people struggle with and some tips that can help.
What are some of the biggest, like, roadblocks people hit when they're trying to learn English?
Fear is a big one, like being scared to make mistakes.
Yeah, I can see that.
I remember when I was learning French, I was so nervous to actually, like, speak. I would, like, practice whole conversations in my head before I would even open my mouth.
It's intimidating putting yourself out there.
Totally. But you have to remember, everyone starts somewhere. You're going to make mistakes. It's part of the process.
Yeah, it's how you learn, right?
Exactly. Another thing is finding the right way to learn. Some people, they do great in like immersive environments, live in
Okay.
an English-speaking country, that kind of thing.
Total immersion.
Right. Others, they need more structure, like classes or online courses. It really depends on the person.
So it's about figuring out what works for you.
Exactly. And it might take some like trial and error. Try different things, see what you like.
So what about those tips? Like, what are some things that actually help people get better at English?
Honestly, the biggest thing is practice. Just use the language as much as you can, any way you can.
It's like anything, the more you do it, the better you get.
Right. Don't just stick to textbooks. Watch movies, listen to music, read books, all in English.
Get that real world experience.
Yeah. And there's so much technology now that can help. All those language learning apps, online resources.
Like Duolingo, Babbel, all those.
Exactly. They can be super helpful for building vocab, working on grammar. Some of them even have like games and stuff to make it fun.
Make it less like, homework.
Exactly. And don't forget about online communities. Talking to other people who are learning English. It can be really motivating.
Knowing you're not alone in the struggle.
Totally.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, the most important thing is you got to be motivated. Learning a language. It takes work. It takes time.
There are going to be times when you just want to give up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But that's when you got to remember, like, why are you doing this? What are your goals?
What do you want to be able to do with English?
Right. Keep those goals in mind. And celebrate the small wins.
Every little bit of progress counts.
It all adds up. And when you connect it back to like the bigger picture, learning English, it's more than just a skill. It's about like opening yourself up to new experiences, connecting with people from different cultures.
It's about expanding your world.
Exactly.
So I guess the takeaway is learning English is a journey. It's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the English language. It's a fascinating subject, and we've only just scratched the surface. But hopefully this has given you some things to think about, some ideas to explore.
And maybe even inspired you to start your own language learning journey.
Until next time, keep diving.